Hello. Welcome once again to another ACM Essay Series event. I'm Zachariah. I will be introducing y'all all to our speaker again, but glad to have you back. This is our second day out of 3 days of the ACM Essay Series Advanced JavaScript series with Gene. And let's just jump into it. Clicking. Again, I want to reintroduce, we are ACM San Antonio. We are a part of the San Antonio's tech community, and we're assisting in the cultivation of the thriving and professional community here. So I'm super excited to have y'all back here for a second time. Or if you're following along later, glad that you're watching through this stuff. We're excited to be putting on things like this for you. As a reminder, this is our team. I'm Zachariah Holland. I am the chair for ACM San Antonio, the professional chapter. Gene, our speaker today, is actually my co-chair. Excited to have him here, and our treasurer, Mark Robinson. Additionally, we do have a way that you can support us as well as a way to support yourself. We are looking for your interest in ACM San Antonio membership, or we are calling it the ACM SA full membership. Essentially, the differences that you get is to help support the org. We put on a bunch of things, whether or not it's renting rooms, whether or not it's buying food for events, or even prizes for events later in the year. We use that. We use funds like that for those kinds of things to give back to y'all. So we are a nonprofit. So if you're interested in becoming a member today, we do have a membership offer right now for first member that you can take advantage of until the end of June. So remember that 50% off turns it into 25 bucks for a full year until the end of June. So if you're interested, take advantage of that. Would be super glad to have you a part of that and see you at more meetings. Additionally, as always, make sure you follow us, keep up with our events and upcoming. We have a Luma calendar that's free to us. Meetup is another place to keep up, as well as joining the conversation. If you're not attending events, or if you're just trying to find some time to be involved, Discord is the next best place. It does lead you to our partner. I'm gonna say partner, Dev San Antonio or Dev SA Discord. We're excited to have over 500 members in that Discord. If you're looking for another place for an outlet for yourself, definitely go check it out. If you're looking for other events, hang around, find out. But yeah, I don't want to take up too much time. I want to get right back into it. Excited to have Gene here for the second day. Let me bring him to the stage. Hey, Gene, how are you doing? You excited for today?
Yes, Zach. Very excited. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Glad. Well, let's just get it right on. You ready? Oh,
All right.
make
I'm
sure
ready
you're
to go.
presenting. I don't have your screen.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
1 second.
I don't know what happened.
No worries. We got buffer time.
Window or screen. There we go.
Awesome.
All right. Let me go ahead and just put this in slideshow mode. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to day 2 for Advanced JavaScript Concepts. Today, we will be going over objects. And in a minute, I'll show you that I've kind of split this into 2 different days here. Last time, I was unsure about day 3, but now I'm more sure about day 3. As I was putting together the slide deck, I overbooked, if you will, this day with a bit too much. And I want to just make sure that those really advanced concepts, i.e. inheritance and prototypal chaining, are well covered. So we're going to be stopping short of that part, and we'll be picking that up on day 3. For those online, I apologize. Day 3 is going to be in person unless inclement weather tells us otherwise, but I doubt that. So the in-person event will be held locally here in San Antonio. So if any of you are exceptionally remote and feel the strong desire to fly down to San Antonio, I welcome it. But without further ado, let's go on and get on into this. Once again, my name is Gene Tigner. I am a UTSA 2020 graduate. I am a software engineer at HEB. I do mostly web development. However, I do have a background with Android development as well. But in terms of my experience with JavaScript and TypeScript, I have about 5 years under my belt for both of those. TypeScript is my favorite of the 2, just because I prefer strongly typed languages. They're easier to test and easier to build with, in my opinion. But anyway, other than that, from an enterprise perspective, I also have about 5 years experience. And see here on the screen some of my favorite things. This is my team at HEB on the left, sorry, on the right hand bottom side here. And then here's a small picture of me when I was a baby, as a little child. Anyway, moving on. So day one, we had array methods, and we talked about the concepts of array methods and the prototypes for those. Day two here, we're going to be talking about objects and object complexities within JavaScript. And then day three is I have here is objects continued. That's just going to be the more advanced intricacies of objects within JavaScript. So from a conceptual standpoint, what is an object? Well, an object is pretty much anything that you can conceptualize, what you can touch, that you can feel. But, how do we represent these things in code? How do we represent these things in an ambiguous way so that we can convert that to code? Well, one strong way to think about it is that the object is the whole, and then that all the properties of an object are the parts of that object, or what define that object. So here you can see I have pictures of a car, a cup, a plant, a pen. All of these can be converted into a conceptual object. So here I'm going to take probably one of the, in my opinion, most primitive things you could possibly create. For the sake of simplicity, for the sake of this conversation, we're going to be constructing an object that we're going to define as a box. And on the right here, I have a picture of a cardboard box. And what we're going to say here is how are we going to define this box? What is some of the lowest level things that we say that a box must have in order to be considered a box? Properties of a box. Well, you have the height of a box. You have the width of a box. You have the length of a box. And what else can we do here? What else can we say about a box that may be defining characteristics of it? Well, one thing we could say is that it holds other objects. Another thing we could say is that it's openable. Obviously, there's a lot more things that you could say about the properties of a box. You could define things like what is the material made out of. You could put things in the box. What's in the box? Anyway. Nothing. Anyway, so basic JavaScript object notation. So if we're going from this conceptual thinking of defining what a box is, what does that look like when we define an object in JavaScript? Well, if you are familiar with JavaScript as a programming language, then you are probably familiar with this particular notation. Objects are defined by curling braces, brackets, and their properties are defined inside of that, and you can define these properties as key value pairs, and you can assign them to anything else you want. So for example, let's I can get pretty crazy with this. So I can say if I want to call a box something else, and I want to say that there's obviously I could say height 10, width 10, length 10, holding, let's say that it's inside of the box, there's, I don't know, a cat. Maybe that cat's name is Schrodinger's cat. I don't know. It's a bad joke. And then we also can say maybe there's also a dog in the box. And then we can also add, an is open flag. And we can set that to false. So what this winds up looking like, if I tell my console here to represent that box, I get this object back. And if I snoop around in this object, I can see the structure that JavaScript has created for me. There are some complexities here. You'll see prototype array and prototype object. We'll talk about those specifics next time. Ran out of again, I apologize, I did run out of time. So prototypal chaining and inheritance won't be talked about today. But anyway, now I can even put other objects inside of my object. So if I have this box here, I've already defined the box, but I can still add things to it. And we'll talk about that in a moment, why I'm able to do that within JavaScript. But for now, let's say if I want to add more objects to it, I can say, well, maybe this box has another box inside of it. So I'm going to say box sub A or something like that. And I'm going to set that equal to this empty shape. And then this empty shape, I'm going to put something like, I don't know, height again. And make that height 0 just for the sake of argument. But if I look at the box again, now I can see that I have another box inside of here, and it is holding another object. And if I pull that down, it also has its own prototype. So you can get very complex, and you can make these objects as complex as you want, and you can put as many data structures as you want inside of it. All right, but what else can we do here? Well, we can access individual elements of that box. So if I say box.height, I get 10, but I can also modify these elements. So if I say box.height equals 20, I overwrite that value. And now if I do box.height to get that value, it comes back as 20. All right. Why am I able to do this if this is a constant? Well, the thing that is in constant space, so in terms of memory storage, the object itself may be considered immutable, but the items inside of it are not. So what that means is this object here is hard to find in memory, but if I want to, I can come inside of that object at any time and modify its properties within it. This leads to some interesting ramifications, which we'll get to in a couple slides. But there are other, going back to this slide, there are other ways to reference the properties of the object that we're looking at. So there's not only is there the dot notation, which is extremely useful, but also there is bracket notation with strings. So if I want to get the width value out of here, but I want to do it a different way, I can do it like this and comes back as 10. I can also use this same method to modify width. So I can say here, this is 30, and I can now say box.width just to switch things up, and that's 30. All right, so that's all well and fine. You probably already knew this. Let's move on. Something I learned recently is that you can just put in functions into your object, and they are executable and self-referential. So what this means is I can define in my box here, I can add let me see if this will work the way I think it'll work out here. And I can set this to a function. And I should be able to, let me see if I can do this the way I think I can do this. Return this dot height times this dot width times this dot length. And now what I should be able to do is box.volume, and it spits out the volume. Now, just to fact check ourselves here, just to make sure that we are correct on every count, if we do a box.height, it's 20, box.width is 30, and box.length is 10. So 20 times 30 times 10. Well, let's just height times box.width times box.length. And it's not a number because I misspelled length. There we go. So as you can see, that function is doing as it intends. Now, what is going on with this keyword here? So this is actually a special keyword that refers to the object that it's within. We'll get more to that later today. But for this specific case, this is literally referring to this box or this object, and it's the height property here of this object. So I'm literally saying, hey, this height reference here, width here, and length here. So let's move on. object, copies, and compares. So that was kind of a basic level look at, how an object is shaped, its properties, what you can do. You can add functions to it. But what if we want to do some sort of comparison across objects? What if we want to do object copies? So the first half of these next few slides is compares, and the next half is going to be copies. But for now, I have a little bit of a challenge for the chat. If those that are in chat are willing to participate. So here we have 2 strings, 2 numbers, and 2 boxes. All of them are maybe tricking us in a way, but they're all set to similar values. So here you can see string A and string B are both equal to the string literal of string A, which is just a word that we've defined and stored. And then we have some equivalence check. So if I was to equivalence check, if I was to say, hey, string A equal string B, that's doing some sort of comparison. I'm saying, hey, is this equal to this? What do we think? What does this chat think that when I compare one string to another string, if they're the exact same string, what would result? Would it result in false or true? All right. No and false. You think that maybe, but it's actually true. So let's go ahead and do 2 constants, string A, and we're going to set that to string A. And then we'll have some string B, and we'll set that to string B. Whoops. So string A as well. And then we will say, oops, I messed it up. Sorry, give me a second. Const string B equals string A. And now if I do a compare, so if I say string A, string B, comes back as true. Okay, well, let's take that logic that we just came up with, and let's move on to this next check. So if we have 2 numbers, do we think that 2 numbers are going to behave the same way, or do you think it's going to behave differently? Well, let's just cut 2. Let's do const. I'm just going to short circuit this const, and I'm going to call this A, and I'm going to say this is 1. And I'm going to have uncaught. Can I not use A? I guess I could do A. I'll just go back to the one. Number A, 1, and const number B, 1. And if I do number A, number B, I'm asking here, the system, hey, is number A equal to number B? And it's saying true, because 1 is equal to 1. All right, so we've just established this, hey, if this is exactly the same as the other thing that I'm referencing in the other constant that I've produced, then it's probably true. But this is where objects get a little weird. If I have this empty object and I compare it to this empty object, why? Okay, it's not going to let me do it that way. In my IDE, it lets me do it that way. Anyway, so if I have, let's just say const box A, and we will set box A to an empty object. And then if I have const box B, and I set B to an empty object, I now have 2 seemingly empty objects that are the exact same. But if I compare box A to box B this way, I get false. Now that kind of breaks our conceptual understanding of what we just did before. Why is it this way? Why does this happen this way? Why does a seemingly similar object, box A and box B, it looks like it's the exact same thing, why is it false? Well, what's happening here is you're not actually comparing the specific item itself, you're comparing where it is in memory and if it's the same thing in memory. And what's happening here with a string is string A, this object literal, whenever you instantiate string A this way, there's only one spot in memory here where that is being stored. Whenever you make a new one, string B, and you assign it to string A, you're just saying, hey, point me back to that location in memory for string A. And now whenever I do equivalence check, string A and string B are looking at the exact same spot in memory. And it's like, oh, this object, this is the exact same thing. because I'm pointing at this exact same object of a string. Same thing happens with numbers. So 1 here, stored in memory for number A. Number B sees that number, JavaScript will see that 1 and it'll be like, okay, so let's go, oh, I have this in memory. Let me just assign that there and move on. So number A is equivalent to number B. Makes sense. But when we get to objects, things are different. Whenever you instantiate an object, it's a very complex structure. So it's going to provide its own memory space. So whenever I say box A, empty object, box B, empty object, technically what's happening is this empty object gets stored in memory, and then this other empty object gets stored somewhere else in memory. So whenever I do an equivalence check, if box A is equal to box B, I'm not looking at the same spot in memory like I am with the string literal or with the number. So how can we conduct equivalence checks with objects? Objects are they can be extremely big. And sometimes it's extremely helpful to make sure that one box or one object that you have is equivalent to another object that you have. So let's move on here. One approach you could take is to create your own deep equivalence check. And what we mean by deep equivalence check is it'll go down every single key value pair that you have in your object, including nested key value pairs, to check if those objects are truly equal to each other in that they're holding all the same information. I cheated a little bit. This function I got offline. Did not write this myself. Didn't want to write it myself because I feel like there's better ways to do this. And this problem has already been solved by other NPM packages we'll get to in a minute. So you could do this. The great learning opportunity. I do highly recommend that anybody who's trying to understand objects and object deep equivalence to challenge yourself and write your own deep equivalence check functions. There's cheap and dirty ways to do it, and then there's more complex and appropriate ways to do it. This one is fairly complicated, but let's move on here. Another way is to just use Lodash. This is probably the most popular use case, in from my perspective anyway, of Lodash, is to use it to check object comparisons. Now, I can't show you a demo of this running in the browser because it's a package you have to install into a Node library, but I can, and I'm wondering if maybe I can do this. I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick. I'm going to go over to my IDE, and I'm going to share that instead. So let's go to share screen, and let's choose this, allow, and I'm going to make a new JavaScript file. I'm going to call it temp.js and add that. And then I am going to do bop. In my console, I'm going to do the npm install Lodash, and that should install Lodash into my project. After we're done with that, we can take a look at the package JSON here for our project, and we can look to make sure that it is installed. Here we go. It did install Lodash. And now what I can do in, say, I'm going to add a run operator here real quick. Start objects temp, and then I'm going to do node objects temp.js. And then in my temp file, I'm going to import underscore from Lodash. And then what I can do is I can make two objects. So I'm going to say object A, and I'm going to give it some property of name, Gene, and last name, not John, Tigner. And then I'm going to make another one, const object B, and I'm going to set it to the exact same thing. And last name, Tigner. And then I'm going to use the underscore dot is equal. Let me double check the dot notation real quick. Yeah, it is equal. Is equal and obj A obj B. Let's see, this is equal is not being, why is this not? I did install Lodash. Okay, fine. Install Lodash. All right, cool. That's what I get for trying to demo something live in the IDE. So for some reason, I'm not able to, maybe that's why. Yeah, that's why I had a comma in my package JSON, so it didn't understand the ref. Okay, so now if I hit this run here, oops, I forgot to print the results. So let's do a console log and let's print these results. You can see it comes back as true. So that, in my opinion, even though it was a little bit a little bit hairy to set up, this is a lot easier for a deep object comparison. And this will recursively go through all of your nested objects, and it will make sure that even if it's a complex object, it'll do the deep compare. But let's see, just to sanity check ourselves, let's give object B another property, something like something, and then let's give it an object in it, and let's put that in here. Now this should come back as false because these two things are no longer technically equivalent. So let's do that run one more time. And false. All right. So Lodash. Let's take a look at some other stuff. So let me stop sharing this and I'll go back to sharing my slides. Share screen and bop. Allow. All right, back over here. All right, so the next slide here. So another way we can do a compare is you can define some normalization off of JSON.stringify. JSON.stringify is okay to use for objects that aren't super duper complex, but it does not. I wouldn't say that you should use it on extremely complex objects. I believe that when you stringify an object, it loses some of its properties, though I need to double check that. Either way here, this particular normalization, oops, let me go back, is happening. So what happens here is the object entries are sorted, and then the object is turned into a JSON object, and it's turned into a string. So now you're comparing strings, which we've already shown that strings, if they're the exact same, are true when compared together. All right, so Lodash is technically the standard. It is probably the most robust library for complex object comparisons. You can do a lot more with Lodash other than object comparisons, but we're not going to get into that. This isn't a conversation about Lodash, though if there's interest, maybe I could do a deep dive on Lodash. So let's talk about copies. Excuse me. All right. So here I have created an object, box C, and I have set it to, I've created a new one called box D, and I've set that equal to box C. So question for the community here, is that a copy? Knowing what you know so far about what I've said about referential memory, would you say that this is a copy? All right. No particular answer in chat, so let's just go on. Maybe. Okay. No. This turns out is not a copy. Here's why. So remember what I said about whenever you create a constant and you create the object, it actually stores it in memory at a certain location. Well, box C is actually just pointing to that location in memory. If I say const box D is equal to box C, I'm just telling box D to point to that same spot in memory that box C is pointing to. I can prove this. We can run a little test here. So let's say we have some object, say const box C, and we set it to equal height 10, width 10, and length 10. And then I say const box delta is equal to box Charlie. And I do box C. Okay, that's box C. Now I do box D. Well, has all the same properties. You know, looks like it's a copy. But let's say I go into box C and I change height to something like 9,999,999. And then I come into box D and I print that out again. Oh, what happened? Height changed in box D, even though I changed it in box C. What's going on there? Well, like I said before, we're referencing a specific spot in memory. We're not creating a copy of the object. We're basically telling box D that it is pointing at and referencing the exact same thing that box C is. So I could do this backwards too. I could come into box D and I could change, say, length here to 30. Sorry, wrong notation. And I could print out box C, and now length on box C is 30. All right, cool. Let's move on here. Is this a copy? Question for the chat. All right, we got a yes. Answer's no. So Trey, you got it right. Good job, Trey. So once again, this is also doing the same thing. It is create. We're using object.create, but object.create box C is saying, oh, hey, this object literally lives in memory. Let's just have box C point to box C's location. So if we come in here, I'm going to keep box C the way it is. I'm going to make a new one. I'm going to call this const box E. And I'm going to say that this is equal to object.create, and I'll pass in box C. And then I will print out, so I say, let's see here, box E. Actually turn into an empty object. That's interesting. This is not how that behaved earlier. See. Interesting. It assigned it to the prototype. Interesting. So if I do box e.prototype, that's not defined. I spelled prototype wrong. Prototype. Still undefined. Okay, well, I will do a little bit more research into that. But anyway, here is the object. It is assigned to the prototype. So technically, it's not exactly a copy, but it got shoved into the prototype, and the prototype now references the object. And if I change the box E or box C dot, let's say height, and height there is 9,999. So let's say box height is going to be equal to, let's say 300. And I come in here and do box E. Now, the prototype here is holding 300. I will double check the prototype here. I stumped myself. That's my bad. And I'll get back to you guys with an answer on that one. But third time's the charm. Is this one a copy? Here I'm using structured clone, and I'm making a structured clone of box C. I'm pretty sure you guys can infer on this one if it is a clone or not, if it is a copy. Correct, Zach, it is a clone. So if I take box, let's do F, and I say structured clone of box C, and I spit out box F, again, it looks fine. But what if I modify box C? The height value. Say this is 299 now instead of 300. Well, if I look at box C, it's 299. If I look at box F, still 300. So what structured clone has done here for us, it has created a new reference in memory and duplicated all of the elements within box C into box D. Structured clone has a lot more capability than this. Structured clone, you can transfer items, and you can have things that are transferred from one object to another to share the same referential space. If we look at what structured clone's definition is on the MDN, the structured clone method of the window interface creates a deep clone of a given value using the structured clone algorithm. This structured clone algorithm I really haven't looked into, but it is referenced here on the MDN, so you can read up on it yourself. Excuse me. Again, don't have time to really do a deep dive on structured clone, but I do think that it is worth spending time as a JavaScript developer to get to know well. Moving on here, let's talk about constructor functions. So probably if you're coming from other programming languages, you're used to objects kind of being defined in this class structure like Java, stuff like that. You can do that here as well with JavaScript. It does support classes, but I would argue that classes are kind of just this sugar that's kind of around an object. Objects are extremely dynamic and flexible, and JavaScript at its core likes to be dynamic and flexible. That's why it isn't typed, quote unquote. Anything could be anything, as we discussed last time. But we can introduce some logical structure here. So if we take what we here I've defined an object as you've seen it before, of a user, and it has a first name, last name, and email as properties. So what makes up a user? First name, last name, email. Cool. These are strings here as I've defined them. They can be whatever they want, whatever you want them to be. But what is another way we could represent this? Well, we can use something called a constructor function. So what this allows us to do is it allows us to kind of create a similar feel that somebody in an object-oriented world might desire. Whenever we create a function user this way, and we give it a first name, last name, email, and then we define the object the object reference here, or what's inside this function, to use this first name equal first name. This is a classic constructor format. What we're saying here is we're saying that the provided first name here gets stored in this object's first name field. This does not mean this first name. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. You can. Okay. This means this object, as we discussed before. So we're saying, hey, this object has a first name field. Assign it to the first name that's being passed in from the dev. Oh, it has a last name field. Assign it to the last name from the dev. Oh, it has an email. Assign it from the email from the dev. I don't technically have to call this email. It's just normal convention. Like I call this cookie, and I could say this email equal cookie, and it would do the exact same thing as long as I understand that cookie is an email from a dev perspective. But we want to write things clear, so we write it this way. I can show this working. So I will make a, let's see, how do I want to do this? Let's do, I actually haven't tried this in the browser's console, so we'll see how this works. I have done it in the IDE, and there are some differences between console and IDE. So we're going to say first name, and we're going to say last name, and we're going to say email. And we are going to do this. here, and inside of this, we are going to say this dot first name is equal to first name. We're going to say this dot last name is equal to last name. And we're going to say that this dot email is equal to email. Let's see if that allows me. So I've made this function. It's now living in memory. Let me see if I can actually use it. So this next slide. So let's define some user. We're going to make some constant user. And we're going to set this to new, which in the object, like Java, you're probably used to saying new because we're making a new constructor of a new construction of a user, and we're defining that back and being stored in the user variable here. So we're going to say new user, and I'm going to pass in my first name. I'm going to pass in my last name, and I'm going to pass in my email address. Yes, that is my real email address. Please don't sign me up for things. Or do. I'll just block it. All right, so if I do this here and I spit out user, there we go. So here, as you can see, I made that function that was on the other page. Here I've assigned user to a new instance of user using my first name, last name, and email. And I've also got here a representation. It does alphabetize the entries, which is okay. It's fine. It doesn't mean that we've done anything wrong here. But you'll see that it has my email, and I misspelled email like a dummy, first name and last name. And then also you can see that I also have this prototype here. Again, just making note of that. We'll talk about this next time. But how is this beneficial to us? Well, it's beneficial to us in a few ways. We now have a permanent definition of what a user kind of should be, and I can reuse that in multiple locations. So if I want to make another user using those defined properties without having to type back in, first name, last name, stuff like that, I can just say, okay, now I have this second user, say const user2, and I can say that, well, this is new user, and I can say this is like James Peach at Giant Peach at, I don't know, movie.com. And now I can spit back out user 2. Don't know why I thought of James and the Giant Peach for that. Maybe that means I need to go rewatch that movie. But anyway, you can see here that now I have user 2. And then I have user 1 still, or use the original user as well. So I have now 2 different users here. Okay, this is great. But why is this even better if you're using it in an IDE? When an IDE, especially if you're using WebStorm or other IDEs that are especially built for JavaScript, they can take the context of this object and they can make it easier for you to read whenever you're making the constructor, the new user here, or the new whatever constructor function, constructor part. So here you'll see that it's saying, hey, I'm expecting first name here, I'm expecting last name here, and I'm expecting email here. Very useful. Let's move on ahead here. Oh, okay. So that's pretty much it for today. And I know we got about 15 more minutes here, and I want to make sure you guys are getting the time that you deserve. So I'm going to introduce a couple more things, and then we'll get to questions if anybody has any questions. The first thing I'd like to show. Remember how we had this box up here? And in this box, I defined this volume. Where did it go? Function. Well, what if, hypothetically speaking, you probably wouldn't do it this way, but one thing to kind of, let's go back a bit. So in the last lecture, we had array.prototype. Well, .prototype exists on any object item. So even with this box that I created here, I have, so let's do this. Let's do const. Do I still have box? Yeah, so I still have box here. So I'm going to make a new function, but I'm going to do it in a different way. So, but let me see. Should I do, I'm going to make a structured clone. I'm going to call it, I'm going to do const box 2. And I'm going to say that this is equal to a structured clone of box. And then I am going to hit enter here. Did I misspell structured clone? Function object cannot be cloned. Anonymous. Well, why can't I clone you? Good question. All right, skip that idea. All right, so let's take a look here. So let's say I have box. I can access the prototype here, prototype, and I can add a new function this way as well. So earlier I added volume, but I added it by going into the box directly. Here I'm going to add another function called, I don't know, get height. And I'm going to set this equal to function, and I'm going to just have it fetch the height value. It's kind of a silly function, but I'm doing this to make a point. So I'm going to have this return this dot height. What do you mean it's undefined? Let me double check something in my IDE real quick. Sometimes the things that we do live don't work the way we expected them to. So let's see. Okay, that might be it. Let's do this with the user, not box. So that user here. So if I set user, is that defined? Okay, that's fine. User.prototype dot example. User.prototype is undefined. All right, well, you know what? Now I'm questioning why that worked in my IDE versus why it's not working here. Maybe I'm missing something. Anyway, let's move on from that. So I'll make that example next time. But for now, let's go ahead and just cut to any questions that you guys might have. And then we'll go from there. I'm not seeing any questions in chat. Zach, would you like to take over for the last few minutes?
Yeah, I can totally do that.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Do you have any outros you wanted to share with the team? Share with the people attending today what they can expect next week? Do mention it's in person.
So yeah, a couple of things that we're going to be covering next week. And I'll make sure that these demos work next time.
No worries.
But so for a couple of things next week, we are going to be covering, let me get my notes here real quick. Inheritance and prototypal chaining.
Okay.
And then we're going to be looking at some historical quirks and discussing some things about predefined prototypes and how they're represented. And then we're going to look at creating our own custom behavior based off of that historical quirk.
Awesome.
I may also pad it out with some interesting questions and challenges for the users in person.
Okay.
So bring your laptop
Yeah.
if you're going to be
Make sure
there.
that's shared then. I'm excited. I'll make sure to try to follow along a little bit with my device next time too. But thanks for being on again, Gene. Always appreciate you. I like the conversation, and I look forward to our in-person event next week.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Zach.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for joining us, Gene. I'm gonna close this out with some reminders. I appreciate you all for being here. But yeah, that was Gene's presentation of Advanced JavaScript Day 2. Excited to have had that happen again. Looking forward to our next event. And speaking of events, there's a ton going on in the community this year, this month. There's some events happening at the Coder Study Group. We have our Day 3 happen on April 10th. The Pi Texas conference. So if you're a Python fan, that's happening next week in April. Get your tickets right now. I just saw in the DevSA Discord that there are some free tickets up for grabs right now. The raffle drawing for those in tomorrow. Also, some cool groups that if you haven't checked out yet, the OWASP group, the Byte Night from our new Alamo Tech Collective group. I believe that will be their second event for the year. I'm excited to have them starting to pop up a little bit more often, as well as a first event, first timer for the San Antonio AWS meetup happening on April 15th. And recently, I just updated it today. The UX collaboration workshop just got announced for a Saturday 3 to 6 event happening as well. We also have some more stuff happening closer to the end of this month, April 23rd and April 30th. We have unpacking containers with Swinney from USAA and an infrastructure engineer, as well as a web scraping and smarter summaries with AI agents presented by workshop presented by Ki Yang, professor at UTSA's data science group, as well as another cool Alamo Collective event, Introduction to Proxmox. Not sure what that is, but interested to learn more. Um, as well as a big event. If you haven't seen it on social media yet, we are posting about it. We are having a presenter on April 30th talk about AI agents. But this is in partnership with the local Geeks and group. Um, Putting on a bunch of different things. The focus this month started on April 1st with AI agent focused goals. You can bring any type of event. You could, if you're already been working on stuff with AI agents or you're looking to try to build something with them, there's a ton of events being put on by all these people down here, all these groups down here. It would be excited to have y'all a part of that. Definitely check it out. It's happening this whole month with a big showcase in person on May 10th. Additionally, we are also putting on a big event come the late part of June. We have an Unreal Engine workshop. It is paid for, as you might see that over there to your right. It is $45 until June 4th, 55 until June 18th. And then if you are an ACM San Antonio full member, we're giving you a full 50% discount. If you're keeping up, that's 50% off your yearly ACM membership, as well as 50% off this workshop for a 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. All day event. You are fed by our local Unreal Engine expert, Marco Torres. Come check us out if you have more questions. That's available in our calendars and such. Also, want to give a big shout out to our partner, TechBlock. They're wonderful to work with. We're appreciative of them all the time. And if you want to support, definitely check out their social platform and follow them on their socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. Pretty cool to check them out too. As always, we want to improve, keep on building on things. I'll do this for our in-person events. I'll do this for our virtual events. But your feedback is important to us. Whether or not you rate us on Meetup, you do this through this forum for us. Always looking to hear a conversation about how we can improve and add on to our events. But without further ado, that's pretty much it for us. I appreciate you all for being here. We always are trying to build, trying to create, and we're excited that y'all got to attend our event today. But with that being said, we look forward to seeing you in person at Project Cowork on April 10th for Gene's final event. Hoping to get make sure you saw it is 6 p.m. But it look Y'all have a good evening and see y'all next week.